In 2012, in the Kumekucha blog, I wrote that we had only seen season 2 of the Esther Arunga story. A story that has everything you'd expect to see in a Mexican soap, and then some, as the Americans would put it. But then not only that, the Esther Arunga story has more twists and turns than any other soap you have ever seen. But the saddest bit of it all, it's all real life. Yeah, it's not fiction. But how would I have known, in 2012, that this Esther Arunga story would end up in tragedy? And now, this former KTN news anchor is all over the news yet again. You know, it is interesting how people are so quick to criticize others, and yet they don't see themselves. Because the story of Esther Arunga is the story of many women. How so? Well, I'll tell you. A woman falls in love, and that is the beginning of their troubles. And in many instances, there is another man in their life. At the time they fall in love with this other man, there's somebody else. And that other person is the kind of person that would have given them a better life. But unfortunately, in most instances, that other person is boring. And so, along comes this other guy who sweeps them off their feet. And that is the beginning of their many troubles. Indeed, that is the story of Esther Arunga. And so, let us tell this story right from the beginning. Now, before I start, I must say that in most cases, people expect to learn something from a story. Maybe something they can apply to their own lives. But in this case, I'm afraid that may not be possible. Because women are wired to make decisions with their emotions, with their feelings. They make a decision according to what they feel. And it has been like that since the beginning of time. And I don't think it's going to end anytime soon. And so, you can be sure there'll be many other Esther Arungas in the future. Anyway, let's start the story from the beginning. Esther Arunga studied law. In fact, she was admitted to the bar right here in Kenya in 2009, making her a qualified lawyer. But the other thing she did in college was communication. And I believe that is the kind of CV that quickly got her a job at one of Kenya's leading media houses, KTN, where she quickly made a name for herself. And then she joined a church founded by a distant relative called Joseph Helen. And in early 2010, she moved out of her parents' house where she had been staying, into a mansion owned by the church. This church was called the Finger of God, where she ended up living with the members of that church. Now, it is quite likely that what triggered this move from her parents' house was some kind of crisis. And it is interesting that in one of her interviews, Esther Arunga said that her parents had in fact wanted to marry her off to a powerful politician who was in government. The implication here is that her parents had strong connections with very powerful people in government at the time. And that may explain some of the things that happened later, which I'll come to in a minute. Now, shortly after joining this church, Esther met a man called Wilson Malaba, who was an elder at this church. And she got engaged to him. But that engagement was broken, shortly after she met a man called Quincy Timberlake. A man who speaks with a flawless American accent, so much so that the police in Kenya once arrested him with the plans to deport him because they were sure he was a foreigner. And yet he hails from Luo Nyanza. And he was born, wait for this one, Sami Sajit Singh, Yeah. Now, apparently, his mother was a great fan of a rally driver called Joginder Singh, a great Kenyan rally driver in the 70s and 60s, I believe. Now, I find it super fascinating that our brothers and sisters from Luo Nyanza, they have a way when it comes to giving their babies names. Yeah, they normally give their babies names from all over the world, not just from Kenya. You will find somebody called Bomb Blast Onyango. Now that is a name which would come out of the tragedy that happened in Nairobi when the American embassy was hit by a terrorist attack in the late 90s, I believe. Not to mention Reagan Omondi or Clinton Onyango or George Bush Ouma, all named after American presidents. It wouldn't surprise me at all if quite a number of babies born recently or born in 2018 after March are named Handshake Onyango. Anyway, forgive my digression. Arunga and Timberlake first burst into national limelight in February 2010 when they held a press conference. Esther Arunga, Quincy Timberlake, and Pastor Joseph Hellon to announce the formation of a new political party in Kenya called the Placenta Political Party. Quite a strange name for a political party. And they even announced that Joseph Hellon would be running for the presidency of the Republic of Kenya and deputy president would be Esther Arunga. Now I'm certain this is the press conference that got them a lot of attention from the intelligence community. And shortly after that, there was a dramatic arrest at the mansion where Esther Arunga was staying with other church members. And although Esther Arunga was amongst those arrested, because they arrested quite a number of church members, she was not charged in court. And the people who ended up being charged were Pastor Hellon and Quincy Timberlake. Now, although Esther Arunga was arrested, amongst the others, she was not charged. And the only two people who ended up being charged were Pastor Joseph Hellon and Quincy Timberlake. They were charged with belonging to a church which was not registered and indeed a dangerous organization. Now, apparently the police had not done their homework because in fact, the Finger of God Church had been registered 5 years earlier. And so the case went absolutely nowhere. But this was just the beginning of the drama in Arunga's life. Because shortly after that, Arunga came out with another press conference announcing that she intended to sue her own parents, amongst other people, the police, the government, etc., etc., for kidnapping her. She even said that her parents had taken her to a shrink by force against her will. In retrospect, this was clearly a very determined effort to separate her completely from a man called Quincy Timberlake. You will remember that I had said earlier that the parents of Esther Arunga must have had very powerful connections with the government. And that is what probably neatly explains why Esther Arunga was not charged in court when Timberlake and Pastor Hellon were charged. And it also probably explains why no action was taken, despite the fact that she wanted to sue people for kidnapping her. Anyway, in 2012, Esther Arunga and Quincy Timberlake, who are by now married, so she changed her name to Esther Timberlake, fled the country, and via Dubai, they went to Australia, where Arunga actually got Australian citizenship. And before the end of that year, Arunga was a practicing lawyer in Australia. She was a barrister at the New South Wales Supreme Court. And then tragedy struck in 2014, when one of her two sons died under circumstances that were dodgy. Arunga told police that her son fell down the stairs, but a post-mortem examination contradicted what she said. And yesterday, she admitted in court that she had actually lied. That the truth is, her husband, Quincy Timberlake, had hit their son, in the head and in the stomach, in an apparent effort to get an evil demon or spirit out of him. Quincy Timberlake is now in a mental institution, which can only mean he was certified as clinically insane. And now we await the judgment of the court, on Esther Arunga as an accomplice to murder, the murder of her own son, because she hid the truth and shielded her own husband. Oh boy, these love manenos, they're very dangerous. Now, of course, this is the kind of story you can't make up. This cannot be fiction, because it is stranger, it is more bizarre than fiction. Indeed, if by any chance somebody wrote this as fiction, people would write it off as unrealistic. And yet it is a very true, real-life story. When you next say your prayers, remember to say a prayer for Esther Arunga. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.